lungs taste the air of time blown past fallen sand.
The first week we did this, we went over basic structure and stance with an axe, which, you know, like most of you were here for, a couple of you weren't. Just a quick refresher for you specifically. When I talk about stance with an axe, your fighting stance is this, with your hand, you call this your checking hand, which is the hand you're using to intercept and parry. Different today because we're using a different tool in the other hand, but that's your general like one-handed axe stance. And then you put your axe on your hip. The reason for that is if there's anything like on the back, like a tomahawk, it can get knocked into you, and it also means you don't telegraph your shots. Okay. Other things is like this is called throat grip, which is where you grab it there, belly grip, and shoulder grip. And this is basically like where you want to be for fighting. You've gotten a little too close, and now you're in close quarters, a knife fight, basically. Okay. With all that being said, I will full disclosure for this lesson. I did as much research as I could on the subject of this, and you know how I have a bit of a thing for like if anything sets off my bullshido alarms, I just can't really like get with it. I spent and watched an inordinate amount of media that has totally destroyed the history on my YouTube channel. But essentially it means that what I'm going to be teaching you today is a blend of what I picked up by fighting with an axe and a knife in the scenarios that has ended up happening, blended with the good stuff of what I could find, because there is a lot of videos available for just axe that seem to come from like reputable martial arts instructors, Israeli defense force people, and all these other guys who are like have got like legit media platforms, and they seem like they know their stuff. They're experts in several different martial arts, and they're just generally all around badasses. So they have like a functional base for it. But the kind of aesthetic that was coming across from the Tomahawk and Bowie knife community was just not that, and it was really difficult to get on board with some of the guys whose like all of their paywalled instructional videos on Bowie knife and axe has come from like the 1990s on like really grainy footage, and like the guys look like they've never stretched in their life, like they're really immobile, and they're all fighting with like sharp weapons. So like none of it's like, it's all really like, you know, everyone's scared to swing at each other because they might actually murder each other in the process of training. So it wasn't useful to use, and a lot of the stuff that was demoed and demonstrated was just straight unusable, because there was just so much of that. And if he just stands there and does absolutely nothing, this will work. And I didn't like that at all. So what I've done is basically taken a bit of that, and I'm going to try and give you a crash course. I will put my hand up and say this isn't my area of expertise. This is my definition of a non-ideal scenario to be in a fight, is to have to resort to an axe and then something in your offhand. If I had to choose a thing to put in my offhand while fighting with an axe, it would be a shield, because it is infinitely more useful, and I can think of a variety of things I could do with this I just simply cannot do with a knife, and it changes how I fight. Basically, the stance stays the same. You know, dude? Stance stays the same. Fighting stays the same. And you have the checking hand is pretty much the same. The only difference is you can't grapple people as easily with a shield. You're using it almost exclusively for defense, and obviously you can attack a little bit. Obviously this is a buckler, so much smaller, but a full round shield would be the optimum scenario for me, using an actual shield and an axe, okay? That being said, that's not what we're doing today. We're doing axe and blade. I'm not going to call it Bowie because it's not a Bowie. I got my nearest to, which is this anachronistic as hell Seax. That is, I bought at an auction at, I think it was Templecombe, because it was a charity auction. It's essentially like a Seax blade, but then for some reason they've gone for a really tiny sort of like Saxon Viking lobed pommel that is screwed on. It's not, so this isn't a good blade. I just want everyone to know, like, don't look at this and think, man, I want one of those. Don't get it, it's crap. Okay. That being said, it'll do for today. So essentially, my main conundrum when I started doing this was like how to stand. Okay, because this is the stance that you adopt when you're fighting. Okay. And the problem is that my checking hand, which has now got a knife in it, is forward. And it's bizarre because whenever I've been in this situation where I've like lost my shield, normally my left hand is my axe, because I immediately pull my axe out, which is on my belt, and I'll have a sword or something in my other hand, or even like a long Seax, like something like this. Because I'm fighting dudes who have got spears and longer weapons, and I do that because now I have a, it's not a shield, but it's as near as damn it in terms of like my ability to parry. I can ward off blades, and I can like defend myself a lot better with that than I can with a knife. So like for me, it's more down to sort of like which side is your dominant side, and which side is your aggressive and your offensive and defensive side. So I'm going to be going over basically how you should stand and things depending on what you're trying to achieve. So with that being said, let's talk about holding it the way that they instruct, which is the blade in your left hand and the axe in your right hand. Okay, I don't feel stupendously comfortable like this. The reason for that is that the knife, I feel, requires a precision that my dominant hand. If you're ambidextrous, this would be just fine. Okay, for me, I'm not. I'm very right hand orientated, and for an axe fight, this would be fine if I didn't have a blade there, because I know I can use that left hand for other stuff. But because I'm using this, this is a single edge blade, incidentally, and the wrong one. Still a single edge blade, but the short one. So my main issue here is that to attack, it would be the same as attacking with an axe. Okay, I haven't got a problem with that. That's okay. My main issue comes when, like, if you're fighting someone who's in the exact same kit as you and is using the same weapons as you, and this is where like the fighting style kind of like seemed a bit laced with risk for me, because a lot of the attacks involve leading with the axe, and inevitably the axe gets bound up, and then it comes to who can stab the other person first, because you're now like physically bound to the person, and you can pull them towards you and thrust. Okay, or you can chop, or you can cut. So just to give you an example of one of the techniques that was there, can I borrow you, Kieran, mate? So here was the thing. The idea is he attacks me with his axe. Okay, he swings to like my head. I check it. Okay, and now he attacks me. He had it in a reverse grip in this particular example. He attacks me. So the idea is I'm about to attack him, and then he comes in as if to stab, and he basically stops me. Okay, and so I'm at this point thinking, that's what I do, but that's not the technique. Okay, the technique is this: you roll your wrist across, you somehow catch his axe on the way through. Come here, give me that axe. Good. And then you roll it across his body, and then I know you're thinking it's bah, 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 bah. That wasn't the technique. It was this: stab him in the thigh, and then use the front of your axe to push him, and now you're back where you started. Okay? And I hated it because, so this is how it would go down in an actual fight. I swing, we get gnarled up here, okay? Because checking from that angle is pretty difficult to do. And they were using Tomahawks, which had protrusions on the back. So even from like a reverse like that, you still had the chance of getting gnarled up. So even if I did check him, he's immediately going to stab me, and I'm immediately going to stab him, because I've basically opened up his entire left side by doing that. So if I was trying to do that in a fight, if he swung at me, I'd be going, check, thrust. And that would be fight over, because I'd aim for his neck, and it'd be game over for him. It was all this like elaborate, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you stab him. Oh, stick him is what they were saying. You stick him in the thigh, and I'm there going like, I don't know why you would do that when like his head's there, his neck's there, his body's there. Like it was just such one. Anyway, I'm getting angry just thinking about it. So he cuts with his axe. Obviously, you can do all the same parries as you could do with the axe fight. And the problem is from here is that he's armed in his other arm. So the main thing I took from it was basically that if you end up in a situation where your axes are together, you want to try and screen him with your weapons combined, okay? So I'm not going to be trying to sort of do some cool stuff and pull him over here and do that. I want to basically make it so that I'm not as exposed as I can be while making him so he's covered up with his weapon. So dragging him across like that and like pushing it so his arm is across himself. So if you actually sort of like just attack normally, so trying to turn him so that his body's to the side and his knife arm's as far away from me as I can get it would be where I'd want to be. And then you can actually hit him in places that will actually put him down, like the vital organs as opposed to just the meat of his thigh for some reason. So the main thing comes with any of this is that the second we get bound up, he's not going to just stand there and let me do a thing to him. He's going to immediately try and kill me with his knife, and I'm going to do the same. So I just feel like the whole problem with the fighting style of this is that you're reliant on the fact that you can get in fast enough. land a hit without getting hit yourself. If I engage my axe in a sort of like an offensive strike, if he attacks me with his axe, I've got to try and now parry with a dagger, which you can do, definitely can do. It's just much more risky because you haven't got the same sort of like degree, margin of error. So when I said I'd rather be this way around, is that if someone was attacking me with an offensive weapon like that and he cut at me, I can use my whole axe and the actual haft, and even if I was holding it in throat grip, to defend myself, and then I can use my dagger as my offensive weapon. So the idea is the whole shield and sword scenario, except my shield is also an axe, so I could fight. And to be honest, like standing like that, it means I've got better reach to sort of like ward him off with the axe while still having all the defensive capabilities of the axe. So for me, this feels like a more natural stance because I can attack him at range, and if he closes and attacks me, I can defend myself. And if he's attacking with his blade, obviously you can bring your knife in to defend yourself in that way, which is a problem for him. Whereas if we were the other way around and I managed to parry there and he attacked me that way, you know, I might get him, I might grab it, but the point is all I've got is my haft on him and he can just disengage and attack. Whereas he has got his axe, and even if I parry, he can just shove over it straight into my face if he wants to. So it's a problematic fighting style as much as it's really freaking dangerous and it's hard. So if we're fighting like you're supposed to fight, like this, okay? Sorry, that's how I'd like to fight. This is how you're supposed to fight. Main things I'd say is that defanging is going to be huge in this, okay? So if we're in the position, because these guys were normally like squared up to each other like this. They didn't have like a lead leg. They were sort of like this. And they stood really close as well. You know, they were here. Yeah. And their attacks were sort of like push cuts. Now, the only thing I did get out of my sort of like sordid dive into the gnarly underworld of Tomahawk and Bowie knife fighting, out with that you can make a career in anything if you just like believe hard enough, is that I found a thing called a flick strike, okay? And so like I'm used to, because we fight with rondel daggers, doing these big powerful stabbing thrusts, okay? These ones that are going to impale, and obviously from ice pick grip as well. Because the nature of most sort of fighting blades, like this would have a sharp single edge and a point, but some of them were also like had the back edge of the tip was also sharp, was that you can do cuts like that. You can do cuts where you basically like flick the thing at the person like that, as you would do with the axe. Same principle. And watching it, I was a bit kind of like, yeah, whatever, man. And then I watched it in slow motion, and actually you're basically throwing your point forwards. So what I'm getting at here is that while you're fighting, when you're gnarled up and things, you're not always going to be aiming for these sort of like stabs like that. Because you can move quite fast, you can flick cut towards their face and their neck. And that there, if I catch him with it, and if I'm throwing it fast enough into the neck region, it'll be in and out faster than he has any idea what's going on, but it'll leave a vast wound. And it'll be deep as well. So the problem with like these big, like, you know, like powerful thrusts is that if I get the knife into him, and you've seen how big Bowie knives are. They're huge and they're flat. Now, if that gets into your abdominal cavity, your body sucks the blade, okay? So it's hard to get it back out again. And that's one of the problems. Like, there's a technique we used to learn, which was called the thrust and twist. So you go shtup and then turn it. So you basically make the wound channel wider so you can pull the thing back out. Obviously, I don't know why we were learning that. We were doing reenactment fighting. There was literally no need for it. But like, the point is that the idea was that if your blade gets stuck, that's how you remove it. And it's taught in some manuals, and it's pretty gnarly when you think about it, but it makes sense. Because, yeah, because like, if you lose this thing, obviously, like, you know, he owns it now, but not for long. If that's stuck in him, you can either like try and get it back, but in the process of doing that, he's likely to kill you. Okay, so it's an issue that if you commit to a really powerful like thrust into a person, there's a good chance it's going to be the thing that gets you killed. So one of the things I liked was a lot of these Eskrima Cali guys, and I'm going to hate to say this, but you know, Forged in Fire, that TV show, you know that guy who goes, "It will kill." He had some of the best stuff, and I hate that because I just feel like if you on the History Channel for any reason, like you're like almost like invalidated immediately for like a historical sort of like reference point, because they, you know, share a channel with ancient aliens. But what are you going to do? Now, his was historically valid technique, yeah. So his stuff was based out of a screamer stick fight, so it was fast as hell. Okay, so it was none of these sort of like big chops and things. It was very much a case of he was using the things independent of one another fast to be a flurry of attacks that you'd have to either defend immediately or just get chopped to ribbons. And he was always aiming for, like I say, the neck, and he was cutting across the belly, and he was cutting the hands. Okay? And so like if you're using two sharp weapons like that in a flurry, it's really difficult to like not get hurt while doing that. So if I just grab my rondelle and imagine it's a single-edged blade, and we're fighting, and I'm going, you know, it's going to be an issue. It's going to cut you up. But he's not going to stand there and let you do that. So like if I do that and you actually just hit me, yeah, immediately you get gnarled up. Okay, so my main thing was that there's not really a technique you can teach where it's like this will work 100% of the time. A lot of it was very showboaty. A lot of it looked cool. I mean, you know, anything where you're sort of like doing all these cool techniques looks awesome. But it doesn't account for the fact that they also have an axe, they're wearing clothes, and the reality of this is that the second I do anything, my axe is going to grab onto him, he's going to hit me with his. He's not just going to stand there and do it, okay? A lot of the time it was a guy stood there going, oh my God, I'm getting so badly hurt right now. But, you know, of course, if someone attacks you with two weapons and you just stand there and let them do it, it's going to look sick. So, exactly, yeah. So, what I've taken away from it is this, is that it's really hard, it's really dangerous, and there's only like a few ways I can think of using it that won't just immediately get you killed, okay? And the distance control is the main thing for me. So as with the axe fighting, if you're fighting in the way they say, where it's right hand axe, left hand dagger, you treat it in the same way, but your dagger is more of a defensive option here, okay? So if he's attacking with the axe, instead of just looking to try and parry, because obviously you got to try and get your hand in the right place, and you know, like parrying with a knife versus like an axe is just harder to do. They can get ripped out your hands a little easier. Is anticipating those strikes coming in, and instead of trying to parry, trying to cut, okay? Stepping across, and you can use both weapons if you need to, and trying to sort of defang him while doing it. And the whole thing here is not going to be sort of stepping in and doing that, because obviously then I'm in range of his knife and I'm going to get killed. The whole idea here is to stay as far away as possible. And I think a fight where both people have axes and knives, contrary to the stuff where they're like this close to each other and they're getting into these cool grapples and like doing all this, is that they're going to be all the way over here, and it's going to be real cagey, you know? And they're going to be sort of like trying to get cuts in on each other, and one person will be thrusting like that, and you know, like maybe throwing a cut occasionally. It's going to be like one person will mess up and get hit in the face, you know. So most of what I'd be doing when I was doing this would have my axe online, ready to throw the hit. I'm using my knife to antagonize and being real careful that he doesn't just chop me off at the wrist. And if he puts anything forwards, I'm going to cut it, you know, with my knife. And if he gives me an opportunity, I'm going to throw the axe into his head. Okay. So what we're gonna do basically is a little bit of let's call it experimental archaeology, because we're going to have a play now with the axe and the dagger. I'm not gonna lie, that's pretty much what I can show you as of now, and we'll come back and I'll show you some techniques that I'm thinking might work, might not work. We will go over it, but I just want you to pair off for now, and I want you to have a little bit of a rattle about with your really well-made practice knives, which are definitely not just rolled up magazines I got from work. They're a bit too thick actually to be real knives, but never mind. And I want you to just have a practice fighting in that style. Swap your hands around, see which side you like the most, and just have a see what you can do. Be obviously gentle to one another. Those rolled up magazines are really dangerous, right? So don't actually like stab each other hard, because you weirdly will break ribs. Have you ever seen Jason Bourne?
Not used to slashing. Well, yeah. I was avoiding
Okay, cool. So, I think we can all agree it sucks as a fighting style. It's massively high risk. I was watching people adapt basically very quickly into a more comfortable fighting style, which was what I was looking for really, was to, because I did some stuff at home, and I found myself saying, actually, I'd probably fight like this. And then I was just interested to see whether you would do the same. And a lot of you did. So what do we do? Now, the way it's taught is like this, okay? Like flat-chested, maybe like leading with a knife, maybe leading in the back. But to be honest, like I just don't think this is a plausible way to engage with these two weapons, okay? So like what I was saying to one of the guys was like, if you're both like this, you can get wrapped up, grapple, and do something about it, because you know that you've got a weapon, they've got a weapon, and that's it. But that goes out the window when there's another weapon introduced for you and them, because A, grappling is almost exclusively axe binding work, and secondly, that both of you got knives, and I think you're both going to panic the moment there's an interaction between your axes. It's going to be who can stab first. So that being said, I want to go over a couple of techniques that I've kind of like thought about as being like the most optional ways to deal with this kind of combat. And just before, I just want to say, like, thought experiment wise, obviously, like, no one's choosing to go to battle armed like this, unless, you know, they're in full armor and one of them's a warhammer and the other one's a rondel. I could kind of plausibly see that, but that's a different fighting style again. Unclothed, I'm imagining this is derived from the the old west, where you'd be in the woods and you'd have a knife on you and you'd have probably an axe on you, and hopefully like a musket. But the point is if you get beset by someone, it's probably going to be more than a person. So it makes sense to me having two weapons if it was like a multitude of people who were armed with, like, say, a single weapon, because you've just got two threats, and it's easier to sort of like control an area if you've got two threats at the same time. So you're not going to be fighting like this. You're just going to be very aggressive, swinging to sort of like clear space and just make it so that you can get time to get clear. One of the things when I was looking at Tomahawk fighting was the phrase treed, or to become treed, come up a lot, which is to climb a tree. So like then, like if you had a musket and you shot it, a lot of the guys would run and climb a tree because then they can load it quickly while they're up in the tree to try and take another shot. Because like you can't, it's harder to attack, weirdly hard to attack someone who's in a tree if you've not got a gun, because you have to climb up after them and they've got the high ground, So like it seemed like sort of like not standard practice, but it happened a lot in the accounts. Often enough that they had a verb for it, treed, he treed, which is hilarious, and so our friends. Now, so you've got a few different options here. Kieran, come here so I can hit you, please. So, if we're fighting in the standard stance here, straight away, I'm not going to stand like this. I'm going to be very axe forwards, okay, which is opposite to what we've been doing here, because what I gain from the ability to sort of like hold my blade at a sensible height and things, I don't need to have all the advantages I had with the axe. If I'm just like this makes sense, okay, because I'm looking to attack, I can step in and I can cut, but I have the other hand free, so I can try and engage his weapon. With the knife, while I can engage his weapon, I can't bind onto it, which is the reason that you'd want to engage his weapon. I could feasibly wrap it like this, but whenever you guys have been grappling, I mean, what are the chances I'm going to do this and then go, oh crap, I've accidentally shanked myself, So I just think like, if you're going to be in that situation and they were to attack you with that, you'd be aiming to try and like parry with the edge of your blade. But because you're aiming to attack here or here even, the axe is still free to attack you. So you're going to have to, while that's happening, do two, like that. So the thing I went for straight away is that you're not going to use these things one and then the other. And what I lent into was essentially you're going to adopt a lot of the strategies you'd see when you're seeing people fight with a sword and buckler, okay? One's a shield and one's a weapon, okay? But the roles are reversed in this one. So your axe is more like your shielding hand, and this is your offensive hand for delivering them vital strikes. So I opted into fighting like this, because when you're stood like this, if your knife is forwards, I can just attack his hand. And I'm going to do that every time, because my axe is here, and I can quickly do that and step away. And if he's not mid-swing, I have a chance to sort of lean out and try and cover up while doing that. So I can defang his blade hand immediately, and that does two things. A, now he's not got a knife. B, he can't now parry with that hand. So I've just basically improved my odds massively. So I wouldn't stand like this with my axe here, my blade forwards, or my axe here, my blade forwards, because I'm just asking to get hit in the hand. And having wielded metal axes, you can't expect to be able to like receive an impact from what is essentially a sharp hammer on a stick with what is a very small blade, and has just the mechanics of it aren't in your favor unless you've got absolutely gnarly huge wrists, you know. But like, I'm not hoping to do that. And like comfortable blades like this one, they got very dainty grips, and to be honest, like if he hoofs it, like I can feel my wrist just like losing control of that. And worse, like he could push it into a situation where it's pointed at me. So he might even like double tap me with my own blade by accident, you know, which I don't want. And so this is a war axe, and this literally weighs twice as much as this, which is a bigger axe. Okay, and that is half the size it should be, because Kieran kindly broke it for me a while back, so I've turned it into a tiny little war hatchet, you know. But the point is like this straight away. So if I bind up with this, now swap, do it again. You've just got so much more impetus with like a heavier axe. And if you're trying to then parry, so rude, sorry. I'll make it up to you. Hold that for me with your non-biffed hand. With your non-biffed hand. Cool. So just go ahead and like hold it up like that. Stop it. It's not happening, you know. And he's not a weak guy, and he's been doing sword fighting, so he's like his wrists are set up to do that. It's just not really a feasible thing, you know, to be able to expect to do is to parry with a knife. And you know, they might say, well, you know, you've just not got a big enough knife. I'm like, all right, cool, bro, but like, you know, that's great and everything. So let's do away with the idea that this is in any way a defensive option out with like the absolute sort of like height of need, and it's that or die. The way I would fight with it is to essentially sort of like try and adopt a stance that would be sort of like more familiar to people who are fighting with a buckler in one hand and a sword in the other. Okay, so you're using each of them alternatively to cover your hand, and you're in a position now that I've got all the range of the axe. Because of the plane of attack is there, it means he can't immediately snipe my hand. I have more room to sort of like pull my hands back away from it, and it also means that I can quickly, and especially with the thrusts, hand snipe him and attack his hands in a way that means that I can step in and attack easier with my knife. Okay, so I sort of went from fighting like this, like I was fighting with the axe, and then just my arms just went straight away to sort of give me a little bit more reach and time, and it means that I'm defending the sort of weaker defensive option with the stronger defensive option. And when I said I felt more comfortable with them the opposite way around, so again, that feels very comfortable to me, because this means that I've got my shield, and I'm straight away not thinking this is a weapon anymore. This is a buckler with a blade on the end, you know. So I'm thinking I can bat weapons aside with this, I can parry, and my actual sword hand is free. Okay, so that's what I'd sort of do in terms of attacking stance. If it was a 1v1, obviously like 1v many, it's just gonna be like, get the fuck away from me. So we're here. Doesn't matter really what hand you do, your stance is gonna be the same. I've got my dominant leg forward. I'm sort of leaning over, hunched a little bit, trying to get as much distance as possible, keeping all of my vitals apart from my head clear of my opponent. I keep my weapons basically in front of my face, so he can't just sort of thrust in at me immediately, because if I'm down here, he can just attack my face, and there's not much I can do about that. But out here, you know, he has to get past all that, and he's offering his hands up to be attacked, okay? So if he thrusts at me from there, you can basically just like, you don't even have to do a good parry, but the point is if you just like cross, he's forcing his hands onto your blade, and you have an opportunity to deglove, deglove, but to, if you're really precise, to defang, okay? And equally with that, he has to reach quite a way to get at me with his knife, same as I do, okay? So even if he's in here, you've got more things you can put in the way from that position, and pretty much whatever you do with your hands is going to put a blade in the way of that incoming attack. So it's going to change how he's fighting as well. So all of these, they're out the window, you know, because if you're coming in for a thrust, he's got loads of options to stop that. And if you've had to step in that far to try and thrust him, you're close enough to get stabbed yourself, okay? So I just think what this will essentially come down to is a fight where there's two people like this. One of them will lose a weapon, and then they go down to, hopefully, just a dagger, you know, and then it's this person just toying with them after that, because you're not going to rush in on someone. And the thing is, like, so like, say I do that, and I defang him, and he drops his axe. Now I could go back into my axe stance, because we're on an even playing field now. I'm here, and I'm going to basically keep this knife out in front of me, because we're in a knife fight now. And the second he messes up, stove his head in, okay? So I just think to adapt this into sort of a usable fighting style would require techniques that I haven't found taught by using this. All the guys taking it are like this close to one another, and they're just, all I just see is two dudes that when they're found later on, just like, were these guys mauled by bears? What the fuck happened here? You know? So like, this is how I would fight in terms of like survivability, length forwards, okay? And so you're using your axe almost like a sort of sword, and you're using your dagger to cover the hand of your axe, but you're also aiming with that leading weapon to attack their leading weapon, and you're trying to get into a situation where if you do end up in like in a bind, you can attack that hand and step off. Okay, so a lot of the techniques I've seen done is basically a case of step in, deliver a killing strike, win, you know? And there's never the kind of, you know, like, I don't know why people think you can do this and they'll just be like, you know? Because having seen more than my fair share of knife violence, that's not normally how it goes down. You know, people can get absolutely full of holes and run 100 meters before they realize they've died, you know? Like, it's not a sure and cut and dry thing. That is, you know? So like getting yourself in a situation where you're able to do that would be a much better option than to sort of square up and start doing this fast as hell Kali stuff and just hope the other guy panics or something, you know? So what I'm basically taking away from this is stance needs to change. Distance control is really important, and defanging is basically, whereas before I said your primary targets are neck and head, now it's hands, number one, because the second you can attack those, you're in a situation where like it starts being fairer for you. Okay, get out of here. So,
stance and somewhat concept-wise, it reminds me a lot of some Italian rapier and dagger stuff.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I'm loath to admit it, but I just feel like you can definitely like adapt to the two, you know. Yeah. I mean, you know. Yeah. Yeah.
Or it's just stick the important bits as far back away as I can.
Yeah, exactly. So, so with that being said, let's just quickly go over some options for like, you know, like good looking stuff that makes you look cool, or at least is that maybe usable. Okay, yeah, no, we're not good. Now, what we're talking about here is if you manage to sort of like, obviously I'm ideally just going to chop his hand, and step back, and so like he can like drop his axe or something, or you know like get freaked out and run. But let's say I managed to grab his axe from here, okay? Like I'm not going to do this and then like charge in to try and get this thrust. I'm just going to opt to defang again, and the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to push his axe off to the side, and I will basically chop. Probably my go-to, especially if it was a Bowie knife, chop all day long because they're heavy. You know, if it was like something like a little more of a, you know, like a smaller blade or something, probably like a push cut. Or like either side, do a cut. Basically aim to disable that arm and hand. And once I've done that, I'd probably step back again, okay? Let them reassess their options. And if you know they're absolutely gushing, all you have to do is keep them at range until the fight is over for them, okay? That being said, if you do face someone who is suicidal, and you end up in a situation where he's sort of charging in, okay? So your main options here, like obviously here, he's giving me a nice target. But let's say he's come in and he's trying to attack. And once we've gnarled up, he's trying to push in on me. You basically want to try and like sidestep a little bit. And you want to use your binding axe to try and screen. Okay? You're trying to push his arm across his body. So what I was showing these guys here. So if you just put your axe out like that, okay? So if he tries to stab me from there, he's got plenty of range, and there's nothing interrupting his motion of attack. If I just do that, over the top is where he can attack under. So you've got an option here where you can basically like limit his range by placing his arm and his weapon across his chest. Okay? And I was finding that because I was trying to attack him, and I basically did that to sort of like push him offline, and I was like, oh crap, I've just stopped myself. So you have to go over. Okay? And I feel like, again, with this stuff, if you push him offline, you can gain a lot of range there because you're just turning your side on and getting as long as you can with that blade. And he can just about reach, okay? He can get over to like my arm and stuff, but I'm all up in his chest and neck here, okay? So in terms of grappling now, we're no longer in the realm where we're doing sort of like this stuff and grabbing arms and things. If you're going to do that, so with the bind, so if he comes in and I hook and I manage to get it across his arm there, it's attacking arms, it's attacking hands and wrists and trying to regain. Okay, you're trying to make him drop that axe as a priority and keep an eye on what he's doing with his blade. And the only surefire way to give you a chance when you're in that here is to immediately make his arm an obstacle to him. So push it across that way and like aggressively pull it that way, okay? Because if you disarm him from there, you're in a better situation. If he holds on to it, you're already in a better situation, okay? Because I've got access to his back and his arm, and he has to sort of do gymnastics to get to me with his blade. So I think, in summary, it's a terrible place to be. Wouldn't want to be it. It's not often I'd say I'd opt to have one weapon left in a fight. But I think if I was choosing, I'd have this in my belt, waiting to be used if I lost this, okay? Because I know what I'm doing, fighting with this versus one of those. I know what I'm doing, fighting one of these versus one of these. I even know what I'm doing, fighting with one of these against one of these. Okay, but the point is like, we all know the systems for dagger fighting, okay? We all know the systems now for the axe fighting. When you cross the two together, they're two kind of conflicting worlds there with different priorities. So like here, I know what I'm doing, okay? I've got my objectives, I know what I'm aiming for, and we're trying to sort of like stop his blade from getting into me, and I'm trying to attack him with my blade, okay? With the axe, I'm trying to, again, stop him from attacking me, but I'm trying to get into a situation. I just caught your blade there. That wasn't actually what I was intended to do. I'm trying to catch his weapon so I can deliver my own devastating strike, okay? I understand what I need to do. When you get the two of them, I'm just finding myself sort of like tripping up over myself, okay? So instead of like trying to pretend that I'm in a axe/knife fight and I'm going to use both those skills I've picked up, I have basically reverted to using a sort of like a different style again. So I'm thinking rapier and dagger in principle, but your rapier don't stab so good, you know? So you're trying to do those snap cuts I said earlier for attacking the face and things, with the ultimate objective here being defang your opponent, and then you can negotiate the kill shot. Because I think unless they're sort of like an incompetent, and if they do sort of like a ridiculous swing with their axe misses, and you can then throw in a cut, I think you're going to be in a situation where it's basically who messes up first. So hedge your bets, give yourself as much range and defense as you can, and protect your hands. Because I was watching you guys start, and the fight was going bonk, 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 bonk immediately, because everyone was like, they just had their hands forwards. It was just like, which arm do you want to lose, bro? You know?
Sorry, follow up on that.
Go for it.
I almost got to a point where, like fight and Phil especially loves sniping at you. I almost like had things on my hip at that point, to a point where I'm just like,
Yeah, and then you've lost all your range advantage. You might as well not have bothered. Yeah.
equally, I'm out here. It's just
Yeah. So yeah, it's like standing with your hands forwards like that, you're going to get hit. So give yourself some range and screen your hands with the profile of your weapon a bit. And I just think, I'm sure there will be people online who will like freaking turn their desk over because I've besmirched their noble art of Tomahawk and knife fighting. But the stuff I've seen, I'd put good money on those guys if they actually had to have that kind of a fight, getting absolutely rinsed immediately and realizing that there's only a degree of injury you can sustain before you're no longer combat effective. And to put yourself in a situation, dumb as it might look, you know, where you're basically like doing a completely different style while using the weapons to preserve yourself in the fight, I think I'd opt for that any day of the week, you know. Dumb and alive is fine, you know. And, you know, if you have a choice, by all means have a knife. Just have it with your shield, you know, so you've still got a freaking shield. Because, like, if you have the option, shield all day long, because it's just better, like in almost every way. You can still hit people with it, you know, if that's what you're aiming to do, and do something with your left hand. But, you know, I think longer blades in your left hand might be nice, but I genuinely think that your fighting style would be more akin to this. And I'd be very interested to see people try it out and see if we can sort of like, you know, come up with our own fighting style. Yay. So I hope that's been somewhat instructive. Like I say, it was quite hard to research for this one, and I'm not here saying I'm an expert. Check out me. I'm saying like I didn't have a clue what I was doing. Did a lot of stuff that I've done before and found myself essentially resorting to a different fighting style to make it so that I wasn't getting hit constantly. you know, because a lot of you were doing that, getting hit in the hands constantly, and then you started like putting your arms further forwards, and all of a sudden those hits went down, and all of a sudden it was like who can defang quicker. Okay, everyone happy with that? Any questions from there? Sweet. All right. Yeah, that's it. So next week, essentially, I'm doing my last lesson next week, and it's going to condense essentially everything we've done down. I've not got like an additional lesson to teach because weirdly enough, I can't build like 10 sets of round shields before Friday, so you know that's not happening. So I'm going to bring my round shield, and I'll do a short workshop at the beginning on how a shield changes an axe fight and all the things that an axe is designed to do that made it such a popular choice in the age of round shield and weapon fighting. Okay. But out with that, next week's going to be essentially more of the practice side of things. We're going to get to just fight each other for most of the hour. Okay? All happy with that? There you go.
This is where most battle takes place. When you get around this part here is going to be a nice touch arm. Is on this one. Send my arm and take that. That's all you have. You see, I'm very
or something relatively simple to use, or at least easy to use.
At least the shield is put in the way.
You can not know what to do with a shield and get a good result out of it. But like the dagger is like, just give my hand because I know how my hand works.
Some of it I objectively do not want to take, so like that katana. Like for instance, the one you have the red katana in there. Yes! Oh,